Hey everyone, welcome to cosplay class. So I've gotten a lot of requests on teaching how I made my mascot costume of Blathers. I used to work in a few special effects shops and sewing type mascot shops, so I learned how to make those kinds of costumes there, and I'm going to pass on that knowledge to you guys. So come with me while I teach you how I made little Blathers here. So the first thing I have to do with Blathers is to figure out what size and shape he needs to be to have the silhouette. Silhouette is really important when it comes to these kinds of costumes because if it's off, then they don't look like the cartoon characters that they portray. So I realized that Blathers is two giant circles, and so I'm going to use a pattern that my friend Ted gave me, which is kind of like the stitches of a basketball. It's two giant round pieces that you can make into a ball. And this was made using the duct tape method. So if you have something that you want to pattern but you don't have a pattern for it yet, you can use duct tape and put it over the and tinfoil, put it over the object, and then lay it flat and cut seams and things where they need to be. But then you have a three-dimensional pattern of what you're going to use for your mascot suit or creature. So here I am using inch-thick upholstery foam, cutting the pattern out. And again, you can see it's kind of like the stitches of a basketball. As I work through it and use spray 90 and barge glue to glue it together, I make sure the seams match up so that when I cover the body with fabric, it doesn't look all lumpy and bumpy. So finally, I have a giant ball from the pattern. It's like just a giant basketball shape pretty much, and that is going to be my head. Next up, I make another giant basketball. This one was actually out of, I believe, 1.5 inches thick upholstery foam because I wanted the body to be a little bit sturdier and a little bit wider. So that's 1.5 inches thick upholstery foam, and then the beak is EVA foam. And what I do there is that was just trial and error between heating it and bending it and curving it and gluing it. It's really just kind of guess what it's supposed to look like and then go from there. And so here I am wearing it, running around in half of the costume, looking ridiculous. Probably my neighbors think I'm a crazy person. All the foam that I used is really cheap upholstery foam, EVA foam, which are floor mats, and there's a few pieces of thinner L200 which I use for the cheeks and the eyes, and the little like horn thing. Everything else is fleece and 4-way stretch velvet, which I got offline off of Spandex World. So after I have all of the foam pieces glued together and established for the silhouette and the shape that I want, then I take Blathers inside to pretty much cover them with fabric. What I did for the base was I used the same exact pattern that I used for the foam, but for fabric. So I just sewed fabric in the same exact pattern that I glued the foam, and then bridged it in between of the two giant circles. So I started with the brown, and then I moved on to covering the cheeks and eyes and all of that. You can see here that this is a cheek that I'm showing you right now, and it's the pink fabric around it is actually just hot glued to the back. And that's actually just done by pinning the fabric all around it and then just hot gluing it. And that's pretty much how I do all of the odd shapes, is I pull and stretch the fabric and pin it. Sometimes I need to put a seam down the middle, like the beak, for example, has one seam where I had to dart it, but that's really just kind of feeling it out. The wings are also upholstery foam just to give them a little bit of, I guess, like heaviness to them. But I've also sewn a piece of headliner, which is a really thin kind of foam material that they use for the top of cars. And it's really cheap too, and I've sewn a bit of headliner into the wings so that they look a little bit more like fluffy and cartoony. Headliner is really awesome and really useful when you're making mascot costumes because you can use it to give a lot of depth to things, and you can sew right through it with your regular sewing machine. The inside of Blathers' mouth is actually, it's like a corrugated kind of foam. So it's a really porous foam that's black so that you can see through it, but people can't really see in, and you can breathe through it. So I see through his mouth because that was what I thought was the easiest thing to see through. And so you can see the foam inside of his mouth once I've like got him over me, and it kind of blocks out the inside. And that's also just hot glued on. Because actually doing this using hot glue is not that bad. It actually works great for the stretch velvet and sticking it on like behind things. You could use barge, but when hot glue works great, there's really no reason to use something more toxic. Also, all of the like extraneous pieces on Blathers, from the eyes to the cheeks to the beak and everything, is all hand stitched on. Everything needs to be hand stitched on because otherwise it'll start getting like weird and droopy, and it needs to all be hard attached with stitching. His front piece is all sewn and top stitched fleece, but the rest, all the pieces that look attached to him are all just done doing a hidden stitch underneath it, making sure that everything is just attached to him. I was going to build a fan into the costume, but it broke, and so I was just excruciatingly hot. It's not hard to just grab a computer fan and rig it up with a switch and a battery, but if you have it and then immediately it doesn't work, then you know you're pretty much out of luck. So I never put a fan in him, but I absolutely should have. So, due to sleep deprivation or whatever, I didn't actually get any good footage of me making the feet. So I'm going to explain to you how I make big giant mascot feet. So what I do is I start with upholstery foam. This is actually a one big carved piece of upholstery foam. I think there's about 2 pieces glued together and then carved. I carve it with a knife, like a box cutter, and scissors, and try and get it as smooth as I can. And then what I do is I go around the whole thing with fleece first, because this was a little lumpy and I was pressed for time, and then the 4-way stretch velvet. So what I do is I take pins and I pin all along the piece of upholstery foam, all along that, and pin it and stretch the velvet over it until there's no lumps and bumps. And inside I just have a tennis shoe that is then glued into the upholstery foam. So once I glue all around the bottom, you can see here where it's actually a little bit ridged where I've pinned it and glued it with just hot glue underneath. I then put my shoe soling on, which is actually just L400. You can use EVA foam or whichever hard foam you have lying around that's pretty much just able to take the impact of the ground and nothing will go through and stab you in your tennis shoe. And then I glue that on top of all the like lumps and bumps where you can see where I've hot glued all of the around of the shoe. So you can kind of see here where you can see where there's glue on the inside, and then I make it look all clean and pretty by using barge or spray 90 or whatever to glue your sole to the bottom. I usually use barge just because it's safe and it won't come off. But so yeah, that's how it looks all pretty and clean, and the edges end up looking really nice because I've pinned it and pulled it and glued it and then sealed it all up with this bottom of the shoe to make it look all fancy. Now every costume is a little bit different, so everything that you do is always going to have to be trial and error. If you have a shape you're not used to, you might have to completely sculpt it out of upholstery foam, just one off. You might be able to pattern it. It's really just a process of just figuring it out on your own and seeing what works. Even after I finished Blathers, before Comic-Con I changed a few things on him. I added armature wire into his little like wingling like horn things so that they stood up to give him more of the silhouette, because it's really, with these kinds of costumes, the silhouette is what makes it. If you don't have the silhouette, then it won't look like the character. So I made sure that I added that because it matched the silhouette, and then I also sculpted and cast some eyes. So what I did is I just took some monster clay, got it as smooth as I could in the shape I wanted, cast it up, used silicone to mold it, cast it up in resin, and then just sanded them until they were shiny enough for eyes. Again, I probably could have made them even shinier, but you know what, it's fine. So that's what I changed for Comic-Con, and that's pretty much the only thing I changed from the original, and he worked out just fine. And that's all it is. It's just foam covered with fabric. Most of it's 4-way stretch, some of it is fleece, and yeah, that's him. Oh, I also made the leggings myself. I just took an old pair of leggings, cut them up, copied the pattern, and then just chopped them up and sewed different pieces together and then made leggings. Really a great way if you don't have a pattern is to just chop up something old and just use that pattern that way. And there you go. But yeah, thanks for watching, and if you guys make your own mascot costume, I mean, which you totally should, you will obviously win all of the Halloween costume contests. Woo, Halloween costumes! If you guys want to watch some more tutorial videos on ideas for costumes you want to make for Halloween and more, make sure to click some of the links. Also, you can check out the finished Blathers costume in this video. See you guys next time!